Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
I'm sorry, your ID isn't good enough. Do you have any real ID, or do you have your passport with you?
I'm an American. There's no way I'd have a
I'm
passport.
sorry, then you're going to have to go through some advanced screening. Would you step over here and please pull down your pants and say,
I'm not leaving the country. I'm not
doesn't
getting on a
matter.
plane.
Get used to his police state. I need to see your papers, please.
Papers, please.
And I'll pull out my handy-dandy Avengers card.
Actually, I'll hand them. Here you go. These are the instruction manuals for an Instant Pot.
These are the instructions for the Hindenburg models.
So, another week has gone by. Another week of comic books coming out. Movies not doing well. The fall TV season is starting. 15 different Trump books came out.
Yeah.
I tell you what,
and about 300 Trump comic books.
One thing about the guy, he has helped the publishing industry because I swear there's at least 2 or 3 Trump comics and 2 or 3 Trump related books every week. And I don't read any of them.
Nah, I don't bother. Because, I mean, that's usually what happens about this term is all the guys who got booted out start writing books and memoirs. I mean, that's the whole thing. If you ever got to be in the White House, just keep notes. So when you get booted out, you can write a memoir.
The first one I remember being excited about was Don Regan, who nobody remembers, but he was one of the high muckety mucks in Reagan's administration. And when he left, he's the one who wrote the book that said that Nancy Reagan runs everything, and her astrologer are the ones who plan when they're going to have meetings. And the book is incredibly dull. And that's when I realized these books, they're not made to be read. They're made to have some cool stuff in them for the news media. But just sitting and reading it, I remember it was like, why am I forcing myself through this boring chapter on this? There's no reason to. There's literally no reason to read this book. Anything that you want to know will be reported in the news. So, unlike comics, man, comics, there's all sorts of stuff. Matter of fact, somebody sent us a comic, Joe.
I'm sorry, I was just thinking that strange women lying around in ponds distributing swords is a better basis system of government than what we've got now. But anyways, yes, a while back, as you know, we always enjoy doing previews of people's upcoming works and things like that. And William Dickstein sent us some stuff. Unfortunately, life intervened.
And, yes, we are way behind. But the good thing is, what it is, this book is Chosen, CH05EN, and we got Chris, which, if you go to, let's say you've got your, Joe, are you an Amazon Prime member?
I is.
And do you use the Kindle app on any of your devices?
Hell no.
If you do, you can read this thing for free.
You can.
You can also buy it.
Buy it for like a $6.99.
Yeah, but I was looking it up so I could get some information, and oh look, it's on Kindle Prime, yep. Which most people don't know this. If you read a book on Kindle Prime, the author does get paid for that.
More importantly, the chosen comics are non-sequential, so you can jump on at any point. And the one that William sent us is book 3 in the chosen series. And if you will indulge with me, I will read the information straight off Amazon Prime. Lately, Chris has been running on fumes. She's traveled far and wide, never stopping long enough anywhere to catch her breath, diving in dumpsters for every meal. But when you're a seeker on the hunt for the ink that powers your magical tattoos, eating garbage comes with the territory. There's few things seekers fear other than the dreaded skinners, people who steal the tattoos from others, grafting them onto their own bodies to become a patchwork monstrosity. Chris has managed to avoid the skinners, believing them to be a myth, until she runs into a pair. She's saved by a group of vagabonds and then finds herself surrounded by friendly faces for the first time in a long time. The question is, can she defy the lovely destiny her chosen gene has given her? Or is the path your fate gene provides permanent, truly permanent, no matter what you do? The chosen universe is an expanded universe. The one that we were sent, number 3, is a one-shot comic. It's a dystopia full of superheroes, androids, shadowy government cabals, and people with strange connections to magical ink, where one simple gene can mean the difference between life and death. It ties in all the other ones. You can follow Chris on different journeys. This is kind of a, how would you say, introduction to her. And we were kind enough to actually get the entire book so we could read it. And again, let's see. It is and created by William Dickstein. Cover and art by Ray Larson, colors by Travis, and special thanks to all the dear readers, which of course Cory and I are now because we read it.
Well, before we go into a deeper review, Joe, thumbs up or I'm sorry, buy, borrow, or ignore?
For me, I like this as a buy. And what's nice is you can do it as a borrow too, for a relatively inexpensive amount. And if you like it, there's other stuff you can jump on board. So it's not like there's, this is just a one shot. We'll never hear from William and the crew again. He's got quite a bit ready to rock and ready for us to read.
For me, it was a borrow, and I'm going to go into details why as we go through. But Joe, I'll let you take the floor first.
All right. A little more intro, just so you know. The Fate gene, basically scientists at the Max Planck Institute for Molecular Genetics map out a gene given to the markers of chosen, the Fate gene. That's what we were talking about earlier. It's a latent gene that destines someone for greatness. Might be a rock star, might be a CEO, a Fortune 500. You might save somebody's life. You might give birth to the greatest supporting actress of all time. Maybe you'll have a podcast for 10 years. No, that's not on that, but maybe you'll be a superhero. These with powers often are recruited into the Global Hero Society. You're only one activated Fate gene away from total salvation or complete annihilation. From there, you just kind of start, and we're introduced to Chris. She's in a tattoo parlor, shocked. And what I found interesting is, although we've been given an introduction on what's going on, we don't really know. I mean, we're on the ground level. We're probably at the bottom of the social economic strata of this particular reality. And we're just following Chris, what's going on. Takes a while to kind of get into the flavor of what's going on. I mean, she gets into trouble pretty quick. And pretty much what I mentioned in the opening introduction, she finds a way out of it, and then she runs into the gang that she'll be hanging with for most of the series. And I enjoyed it. Again, big thing for me is the art. It was very easy to figure out who is who, which is always a killer. It's color, which is nice. It's kind of subdued tones because they're kind of in the grungy part of the world. As we get to introduce people, we understand how the world's set up, how the laws work, how these people survive. And I'm actually kind of rooting for her. But as Cory's want to say, nothing's ever permanent. And, there's drama and chaos, and where the book ends up is not where I would have liked it to, because again, I'm rooting for the protagonist. I want things to go well. And I'm interested enough to kind of maybe follow along and see where she does end up, or what else is going on in this world, because we're seeing one little microcosm of a much bigger story. And to me, it was just enough of a taste to wet my whistle and decide if I want to continue on it. I'm gonna just step back. Cory, what was your reaction to this?
I have a lot of stuff to say about this. First off, I like the package. I like the fact that it's set in its own world, and we get that written introduction, which kind of sets the tone for us. And it's easy to tell as you read this. There's been a lot of world building behind the scenes. This is one part of a larger story. And it seems like the world is very well thought out. The art, as you said, it's clear that this artist is a novice. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But there are some scenes where you go, this person needs more. Basically, you need more time, more art, more drawing time. Anytime there was an action sequence, like a fight, everything was very stiff. It almost looked posed. And when you do stuff like that, it takes some time to learn how to make your art look like when people are fighting. There's a difference between a body in motion and a body that's, okay, look like you're kicking someone. Okay, now stop. And we take a picture of that. So there needs to be some more fluidity in the art.
Speaking of the art, the one thing I will say I very much dislike, white lettering on a black background.
Yes.
Very, very hard to read, especially when you have it downloaded. And I'm using a computer with a 17-inch screen. And a lot of times I had to not only squint, but get my handy dandy magnifying glass just to figure out what you're trying to get across. Again, it's a mood thing. There's a couple panels where they do white on blue. Get away from the white lettering. Just put the word balloon in there and let it be able to be legible. Because although I could catch what they were saying really well because they used white balloons with black lettering, anytime you had the black background, white lettering, and it wasn't, I don't even know what the font was, but it was just real difficult to read for me.
The other thing that I liked about the package was the coloring. The coloring was excellent. In a lot of ways, the coloring was the best part of it, in that the coloring did a really good job of making the art seem better than it was, if that makes any sense at all. Such as, real early on, there's a tattoo of a butterfly, and the coloring on it is just amazing, but the art on the page was a little stiff and a little posed. So basically, for the artist needs to work more on basically just get more time under their belt. Learn a little more about making the art look more fluid. The characters were clearly delineated. That was a good point. That's really hard to do for some people. Story-wise, there were things that I liked about it. I liked the world. I like the fact, I like the, how the lead character got brought into a group and how they were doing things that were underhanded, but we still liked her because we'd been introduced to her and we'd seen the bad things that had been done. However, the way she met them was very much oh my gosh, these characters all just kind of ran into each other and they have all these things in common. A little contrived. Also, there at no point in this story did I ever know what the main character wanted. We know what they don't want, but we don't know what they want. The character doesn't make any real decisions that drive the story forward. The character is kind of being pulled along through the story. And when you're doing a story about a person, and that's what this is how is this person interacting with this world? All we hear from the character is that, well, she wants some tattoos. We don't know what she wants. We don't know what's driving her. We don't know
Well, even
where she's going.
the character didn't even know why she wanted the tattoos.
Right.
And that's kind of what I enjoyed about it, is that I wanted to see where she was going and what she was going to do, because she really had no real life plan.
And in a way, that's a problem, because it meant that the story, that the lead character, anybody could have been in it. There wasn't anything to define her as a character. Elmore Leonard talked about, when you're writing a character, every character in your story needs to want something, even if it's just a glass of water.
See, I don't know. To me, that actually worked, because we were told in the beginning, okay, this is the world. You get this gene. You can be one of any of these things. And you're thinking, oh, this could be a lofty world. No, this is just an average schmo who's got the gene and just kind of wandering through life. She's young at that age. Maybe it's because I've got some teenagers in the house that are also just kind of meandering through life. So to me, it kind of struck a chord. And maybe it's because I haven't read a lot of stories like this. So to me, that was kind of the appealing thing. Although it sounds like it was almost the opposite with you.
Very much the opposite, because if there's nothing this character wants, you don't root for them, you don't root against them, and they're also not driving the story. When she gets involved in going to bars and getting credits from people, she's just kind of there. She's a bystander. She's not taking any action. And later on, when something tragic happens, it doesn't seem to affect her. It doesn't change her story trajectory. It doesn't affect her emotionally. She's almost like this void. And I think I would have bumped it from a borrow to a buy if there was something she wanted, or while she's in the bar with this friend, who we don't even know why they're friends. There's no reason for them to be friends. There's no real interaction that drives that.
Well, saving them from the Skinners is a pretty good motivation.
Yeah, but
cliched, maybe. I'll give you that.
But then nothing. They're just kind of just there. It's the difference between a story that moves forward and a story where a bunch of stuff just kind of happens. Another huge flaw with this book that I almost turned it down to an ignore is the lettering. Oh my God, the lettering. Yeah, the lettering is awful. I don't know if it's the font for the...
it's the font.
There are two problems. I understand you wanted the narrative voice to be the voice of the main character, so you want it to look more like writing. But it's not planned properly on the page. On a digital, you really have to expand it, or the letters are connected a lot, and that causes a problem. And I'm going to use an old comic thing. There was a reason why you weren't allowed to use the name Clint or Flick anything in old comics, because in the printing they would look like cunt and fuck. In this, the words kind of blend together, so in some ways you have to expand and can only read it panel by panel, which is okay if it was a grid, but it's not a grid. It uses different page elements. You also talked about there are times where you're using that white font, and the white on black doesn't bother me as much as white on really light yellow and blue. The letters do not show at all. Then for the word balloons, the word balloon should fit the story, and the lettering should fit the art. There are sequences where you can't tell who's talking because the arrow in the word balloon is so small and thin you can't see it. The typeface that's being used. I'm looking at the first one. I think it's on page 1. Jody, the first page, do you see where it says "Thanks again, Har"? The lettering leaves so much white space around the lettering that it looks wrong.
Yeah, this was
And that
probably
happens through
from
the
a
entire book.
computer. They were using a computer letterer, because I get that same thing when I've done like captions on pictures. They're just using a word processing that has a word balloon and just kind of placing it there,
But
because it doesn't look really natural.
Yeah.
There's a couple pages where it was fine, and I'm trying to think of, there's one where it's actually talking heads, which I thought was a clever way of doing the conversation, because you had the head and you could tell exactly who was talking. Whereas later on in the story, you got the two characters sitting at the bottom, and the word balloons are placed apart, but until you see the characters on the bottom, you don't sure who's who. And now I'm looking at the bar scenes, and the lettering is just squashed together. It almost reminds me of an old Flash program, Superlane. You used to go to the website, plaster it on, and then you get the word balloon, but trying to get the words to match and fit inside were always tough.
Yep.
So again, if it's a programming, I don't know what the solution is, because I'm not a digital artist, but it's kind of, it's harsh.
And one of the things you could do is resize those balloons, because all comics now, all lettering is done via programming. And there are ways to do it well, and there are ways to do it poorly. Back in the 50s, EC used what is known as Leroy lettering, which is they would literally, they would have this font and they would print it and they would put it in the balloon. But what they would do, they would put the lettering in and then they would draw the balloon around the lettering, and they would make sure that the lettering kind of was in a block, so that the balloon, a lot of the problem in this book is the balloon's way too big for the actual lettering. On the other hand, you had Carlton, any comic that was lettered by A. Machine, not real clever. They would literally just use a typewriter, type it, and then cut it out and paste it onto the art. And they would have the balloons pre-drawn by the artist, who wouldn't know how big the lettering would be. So you've got some where the lettering kind of pokes out of the word balloon, and somewhere like in this, you've got the lettering and then huge amounts of white space around. You need to resize the balloons or change your font. Just take a look at other comics and see how the letterers do that. One of the reasons why Marv Wolfman at Marvel was thought of as one of their best writers, balloon placement. He knew where to put the balloon to help the reader understand what's to read next. Remember that when you're reading, you're going to go left to right and down. And there was one section where I had to reread it 2 or 3 times because the word balloons kind of went around the panel. It wasn't, left, right, down. It was left, right, then down on the right, and then over to the left. And you don't want to confuse the reader. The best lettering is lettering that you don't notice. Another problem I had, and this was art-wise, remember that when you're drawing, you're the camera, and there are certain things you don't want to do. You don't want to. One thing that they did a number of times in this is they did what is known as a 180 switch. You see the back of the characters, then the next panel is the front of the characters. Every artist who has any experience or has worked with other artists, you never do that. It disorients the reader. They don't know. They don't know what you're doing, and it will throw a person out of the story. Jack Kirby once talked about how when artists would show him work, the only time he would criticize is their camera placement. And he would tell them, never do a 180 turn, never go from never go from the ground up unless it's a, like a reveal shot. You never want to be above the character unless you're showing something happening that they don't see. Rules like that. You learn that over time. But there were a lot of times where the camera placement made the story more confusing and you didn't really know, okay, where am I? What's going on? How did we get from here to here? And depending on the scripting, if the writer's the one who's saying, tight shot, medium shot, long shot, make sure that you're giving the artist that direction so that they don't get confused. The story didn't have an ending. It just kind of stopped. And remember, when you're writing a story, especially, this is 50 some pages. So it's not a novel. It's not deep and rich enough for a novel. It's a short story. Your short story should end with a punch. Boom. Here in this one, when you have a very dramatic event around the 35 to 40 page mark, have that as the end of the story, because there's your dramatic punch. Instead, it was, okay, here's our dramatic punch, and then it just kind of fades off. Even if everything is self-contained, you want to have that punch at the end. When you're watching TV,
I thought it was a bit of a punch. I mean, she had a group, she had a friend, she was on the edge of belonging, and things went bad, and I think she freaked and left. I don't think she needed to leave, but people react differently in different situations, and they spent so much in the beginning setting up the fact that she was just alone with her inks, and so for her to actually run into these people that she started to form a bond with was more unusual. And I don't think she knew how to deal with that, especially when things kind of went sour and then she just left.
However, I never felt the connection to them, because we had scenes with her and her female friend as they're doing the bar stuff, but there was never a feeling that these people are bonding. And I don't know if that was a pacing thing.
I don't know. I picked up that there was bonding, I guess. I don't know. I'm curious, though, because I misspoke in the beginning. Chosen, Chris, is actually the 6th book out of 20 that you can get. The episode number 1, and we'll drop the information as we get to the end, and of course we'll post it on our websites. You can download Chosen episode 1 for free, and then 1 through 5. Let's see, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are 99 cents. I wonder if we had read this in order, if it may have made more of a difference. I think they presented it to us like, okay, here's the world, here's what's going on, but nothing is, this is supposed to be a self-contained story. So maybe if we were more familiar with what was going on, regardless, you can get that episode 1 and try that for free.
And there were a lot of things that I know it sounds like that I'm pointing out all the bad stuff, but what it is, there's room for improvement here, but there's enough that I wanted to see the improvement. It's not like I can't even think of a comic recently where we went over and I said, yeah, this is not even, if I say something's an ignore, it's because there's nothing there at all. This, on the other hand, there's some good stuff here, and I think the creators, if they learn more about their craft, the creativity stuff is there. Learn more about your craft and you could do it better. And I think that's why my review is a borrow.
And I'm curious, again, we only got 1 out of 20.
Yeah.
And we didn't even look at the 0 issue. I'm just curious if maybe that has happened. In fact, I'm just going to, well, I don't have time to buy it, but to find it for yourself, you look for William Dickstein, Tickstien. I'm sorry, EIN, or like Cory said, Chosen, CH05EN, and you'll get everything there, including the freebie Kindle edition you can try. He's on Instagram, again under Chosen. You can look him up on Facebook, William Dickstein. And we'll have all that information in our show notes, because Cory is very good at listing everything. And again, for me, well, considering the first chapter's a zero, I would say go ahead and give it a try, which is a brilliant idea, because that should tell you whether or not you would do it again. For me, I guess, Cory, the big thing is, would you drop a dollar and check out another episode?
Sure. I think there's enough here that these guys, if they continue to improve, this could be a really fun world for them to drop stories into.
And I'm just, let me just snap on one of these randomly. I'm just trying to see if it's the same art team or if he has different art teams. Let's see. Who do we got here? Blah, blah, blah. Cover art, Ray Larson. And let's just pick, say, Grizz Volume 2. Zach Markle. So, again, different. It looks like different people doing the art. So maybe that might change depending on what you do. But William's the one writing everything. So it'll be a similar universe. So yeah, I'm kind of interested to see what else. And like I said, I'll probably download the freebie and maybe a few more after we're done. And I don't like doing that, as you know. I'm more a pro fan of physical comics. But I'm intrigued with this one.
One other thing that I want to talk about, Gerry Conway, heck of a guy.
Heck of a guy.
Started writing comics at age 19.
And what is he now?
He's in his 60s.
Okay.
One of the youngest editor-in-chiefs at Marvel. Recently put out on his fire-breathing Twitter machine what he thinks should happen with the comic book industry. And I have it up on my screen. First, I'll say what he says here about the history, okay?
All right.
To state the obvious, comic book publishing is in serious trouble. I strongly disagree, but okay. And I'm going to be putting in my own stuff here, because that's what I do. With a business model that almost literally has no future. Yet comic books are a source of intellectual property for exploitation in all sorts of popular media and have never had greater potential. So why is this? Why do comics as a storytelling form, superhero and otherwise, have such an enormous impact on popular culture, but comic book publishers are struggling to survive? Why are publishers almost universally failing to succeed at actual publishing? I'm going to disagree with that too. Yeah. My basic answer is they're pursuing the wrong market, and they've been doing that with increasing desperation since the late 1970s. Let's just put aside the incredible business stupidity of depending on a single distribution method, direct sales to a single audience comic book store. The problem is bigger. The defined audience. Okay.
I do want to stop right there. Without getting too into it, his premise right there is flawed, because in the 70s, the problem was the newsstand was collapsing. What saved it was the rise of the direct market. It wasn't until the 90s that it became one distributor.
Right.
So he's jumping 20 years to come to set up his thesis. And again, if there hadn't been a direct market, there probably wouldn't be comic books right now, or at least definitely not the way we're looking at them. So again, maybe we'll give a Joe Prize out to the guy who can go back when, because you did a wonderful, we did a wonderful podcast on the history of the direct market. And it's not something that we want to get into because we'll spend the rest of the episode talking about it. So I just want to point that out, that Gary's idea of how we got there is he's basically just, he wants to get to his point. He's not really using history to jettison his argument, because it would kind of fall apart if he did.
There's one other thing about his argument. The direct sales market came into being because of comic book fans. We've talked about all that. But the reason comic books left the newsstand was because the publishers thought, well, we can't raise prices too much or people will leave. And DC tried a few things like dollar comics and stuff like that, but they basically kept the same small format, smaller than a magazine. The ads were garbage until much later. It was, classified ads and ads for soap that, it turns your hands black. And they weren't charging squat for the ads. Whereas your mainstream magazines, they were bigger, they were on slick paper, they had better ads. At this point, you had Heavy Metal Magazine, and Heavy Metal Magazine sold really well during the 70s and 80s because it was priced as a regular magazine. It went out of their way to get big ads. They were owned by National Lampoon, which at the time National Lampoon was one of the better selling magazines. I think one of the biggest problems for comics leaving newsstands was the format. It's okay, I can sell one 50-cent comic and make 5 cents profit, or I can sell one issue of Cosmopolitan and make 50 cents profit. I'm going to sell that copy of Cosmo and the comic, to hell with them. So let's get back here. The problem is bigger. The defined audience for mainstream comics is an audience that by definition constantly shrinks. I agree with that. For a variety of self-enforcing reasons, publishers have defined the public audience for mainstream comics as, in effect, long-term fans and potential collectors. Hence, fan-oriented, navel-gazing continuity, biannual events, reboots, collector-oriented variant covers, etc. Every single one of these marketing ploys is designed solely to appeal to existing readers. He's talking about your monthly comics, by the way. Even reboots, ostensibly intended to order jumping on points to new readers, actually require familiarity with previous iterations to provide interest. New readers aren't welcomed by the existing creating strategy at the two mainstream publishers, and if anything, new readers are actively discouraged by the publishers' fanatic pursuit of motivated existing readership. The clubhouse is closed, stay out. Partially true. For monthly comics, I completely agree with them. But we're going to get into what I disagree with. Let's see. Publishers, of course, will disagree with this analysis and say they're always trying to provide on-ramps to new readers. But any serious look at what they're offering in the main reveals a decided tilt, in fact, a massive tilt, toward privileging the existing readership. And this makes sense in a way because the cultural creative shift in the editorial direction of publishing houses can be traced back to the era I'm from, the late 60s and early 70s. In the mid-60s, around 1967, DC Comics offered a weekly tour of their offices during the summer. I went on a tour, and like others, Len Wein and Marv Wolfman among them, became a regular. At one point, I had a conversation with then-editor Julie Schwartz. We were talking about a Green Lantern story, and I made some fanboy comment about what I hoped would happen. Julie paused and looked at me and said, "How old are you?" 14, I said. He snorted, "Too old, you're not my reader," and he walked off. Completely, absolutely true. DC saw themselves as a publishing house for children. Most of the old editors at DC had been there since the 40s, and when fandom started, they were confused by it. Mort Weisinger, who was the editor of Superman from the late 40s into the early 70s, said that Superman comics were for slightly slow children. He hated them. He hated what he was doing. He treated them with contempt. Julie Schwartz published puzzle stories, and it's one of the reasons why when I go back and I read stuff from the 60s, the Marvel stuff, which Stan wrote for himself, reads so much better than the DC stuff, which feels like the same story told over and over and over again. I later learned at DC and also at Marvel in the 60s, the commonly accepted view of the comic book readership was a kid, undoubtedly male, between the age of 9 and 13. No. Stan started a fan club and pushed hard for college readership. I mean, he pushed hard for it. What today's book publishers would call middle grade readers. That makes sense. If we're honest about it, the basic root appeal of superhero stories is that part of ourselves that lives in a pre-sexualized, pre-adolescent dream state in which anything is possible. It's the world of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone if you want to be pedantic, young adults and adults can enjoy superhero stories too, even want those stories to evolve and mature just like the Potter books evolved and matured. But regardless of what appeal the first Potter book may have for older and existing readers, its primary readership was intended to be and remains middle grade 8 to 12. The same used to be true for comics, particularly superhero comics, until my generation come along. Yep, we boomers fucked it up as usual. When I and my cohorts replaced the creatives who'd given the comic book business massive success in the 60s, folks like Stan Lee and Julie Schwartz, we brought with us our boomer self-obsession. We didn't want to create comics for kids. We wanted comics for us. That's the origin of comic book superhero shift from middle grade readership in the 60s to young adult readership in the 70s and adult readerships in the 90s and beyond. Wrong!
Isn't that nice? But it's wrong!
Comics were aimed at everybody through the 40s and 50s. It's when the Comics Code came in, it was because Congress and the whole Wortham with Seduction of the Innocent saying that these comics are bad for kids, and the push to clean up comics, they pushed that comics were for kids. And that permeated it. Publishers, after years of, we're going to publish this stuff, and you had EC, and you had crime comics that were published toward older readers. You had Kirby's romance books. You had the war books at the time. They were basically, they wanted everybody. And during World War II, one of the reasons comics sold so well is because they were sold in PXs to soldiers. Soldiers age 18 to 35. So the books were written for that market, just like the pulps had been written for that market. When comics were aimed at kids, DC, they aimed their stuff at kids very early on. But after the Comics Code, everybody thought comics were for kids. And what happened was, as that receded into the background, you had underground comics, which were not aimed at kids at all. And because they did so well, you had mainstream publishers start to want to grab some of that audience. The black and white magazines, Marvel was trying to get adult readership. Books like Howard the Duck, books like Master of Kung Fu, books like Tomb of Dracula, they were trying to grab an adult readership. Conan did not sell to kids. Conan sold to adolescents, college students, and above. They were chasing the audience that had been chased away in the 50s. The refusal of boomer creatives and editors like myself and others to let it go. We redefined readership comics were aimed at, coinciding with the shift in distribution that allowed the right definition to stick. The result is a dead end for comic book publishing as a business. How would I change that? Well, you can talk all you want, but I tell you what, Gary, not to be a jerk, but I'm betting that Watchmen, just that one book, has outsold all the times your stuff has been collected.
Not to mention books like we've talked about, like Smile and Captain Underpants. You never see those in comic shops. I should say rarely, but they sell millions. So
but there's no problem in aiming comics at adults either. Watchmen has sold millions and millions of copies. Dark Knight has sold millions and millions of copies. Civil War from Marvel has sold over 1 million copies. The Walking Dead, oh my God, so much money. Saga.
Wait till the Invincible cartoon or whatever
on.
hits. That'll make that series explode again. Yeah,
So,
there's no shortage of comics and graphic novels that sell. You go to Walden Books or Obits or whatever these. I forget that there's a bookstore that's always selling stuff cheap. There, you'll find graphic novels. Even at the airport, they got a graphic novel section in their tiny little bookstores that dot around. So they are there.
he's right about the monthly comic. And he's right about how the publishers change. But what he's wrong about is he's looking at a specific slice of history rather than he's looking at comics as comics rather than comics as a part of publishing. Novels don't sell real well right now, but you wouldn't say, well, the problem with novels is they're aiming at adults.
Too many words.
The problem with novels is that there's so much competition, and over time, their distribution has caused massive issues. It's that same returnable distribution. I've told the story a few times. TSR, creators of Dungeons and Dragons, through the 80s and into the 90s, their stuff was a license to print money. Their novels were on the New York Times bestseller list. But one Christmas, Barnes & Noble and Borders, sales weren't that great. So they went through and it's like, okay, we need to show a profit for the year. So everything that hasn't sold from these publishers that allow returns, rip the cover off and get the returns. TSR, who was counting on, hey, it's December. This is our big time. This is when we sell the most books. Instead of getting this report of, hey, we sold all these books, it was, hey, here's all our returns. So rather than income, they got a debit. And it killed them. And they got bought by the new kid on the block who was publishing Magic cards.
Never last.
So what he says is, I'd cancel every existing superhero comic and publish a limited new line for middle grade readership, simplify characters and storylines, eliminate every event that acquires more than a passing familiarity with the basic simplified continuity, 10 to 15 titles. For existing readers,
So he's going to go back and do what DC did in the 50s and 60s.
Yes. For existing readers, I'd offer a separate higher-priced graphic novel line with whatever expanded adult storylines creators and readers want to explore, but this would be separate, not monthly, not the mainstream. And I'd do everything possible to get monthly comics into supermarkets and movie theaters and Walmart and Target and Costco and offer subscription services through Amazon, pursue every alternative distribution avenue possible. The present course taken by major publishers is a dead end. They're pursuing the wrong readership. There's a bigger audience out there. We just need to welcome them. Comics will never sell in grocery stores again. Ever, 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 ever. The only reason magazines go into grocery stores is to basically, they lose money on that magazine hoping that you will subscribe. That's why when you pick up a copy of GQ at the local food mart, 15 what they call blow cards fall out of it, those subscription cards. Because when they send a magazine, okay, that magazine has to make money for the distributor, the sub-distributor, and the grocery store. And the grocery store can return them, so the distributor so the sub-distributor can return them, and the distributor can return them. However, if there's a subscription, magazines can go to advertisers. They don't make money on the magazine, by the way. They don't. They don't ever make money because, hey, look, Stephen King has an article in this magazine. They don't care. It's, hey, GQ has 500,000 subscribers. Would you like to reach 500,000 male subscribers between this age and this average income? Advertising is where they make their money. You know how I know this? I had a subscription to DQ that was supposed to be for 1 year. It lasted a decade. They just kept renewing it without asking me to pay for it because I was a male. I was between 25 and 45, and I had the right income, so they could, hey, they're not selling me the magazine, they're selling me to advertisers. Comics don't have that. They don't make money on the ads. They may have some ads, they don't make any money on them. Right now, the comic book that you buy, when you go to the comic store and you buy your comic, you're not really buying that comic. You're amortizing the cost of the writer, the editor, the penciler, the inker, the colorist, and all that, so that when it's collected, those basically you've paid the cost for making that graphic novel, so that the graphic novel makes a lot more profit than the comic. The comic, if it's lucky, breaks even at the publisher. It's when it's collected as a trade paperback that it makes money.
There's also one thing that I always find amusing about this whole attitude of, well, you know, we need to kill the direct market. Why? The direct market is, how'd you say it? A license to print money. Nothing is returnable. The risk is 100% on the retailer. Very, very little goes backwards, unlike the way the newsstands used to be, like in the TSR example you said. You buy 105 copies of Man Plastic #5 and you sell 2, well, tough. You're stuck with them. You don't have return rights. Very few times are you able to return things. If there's a big editorial problem, or if they're being nice, or if they shipped late, but that's rare and it doesn't happen. Why do you have to kill the market you have, and it is shrinking, to create new ones? And we already know, and we've talked about it usually when we do our preview shows, they're already doing that. Up until recently, DC had a whole line of books that were obviously not geared towards you and me, Cory, but geared towards younger kids, younger women. I'm talking actual books and things like that. IDW prints an entire run of Marvel comics and Star Wars comics that are not tied to years of continuity. The Ultimate line originally started out that way until eventually it collapsed under its own continuity. There's tons of books out there and different things that the publishers are doing. DC had the whole Walmart edition thing going on for a while. So yeah, you don't have to kill the calf that's alive right now. I don't see any benefit of killing the direct market because it's a cash cow. It's again, when you got AT&T looking at DC Comics and they're trying to figure out, why do I care about the millions you're making when I need to make billions doing movies? Yeah, that's a corporate problem. Disney's not so crazy about that, because I think as long as Marvel's making money, they're not going to turn to them and go, yeah, we're going to stop publishing. They're just going to look and say, okay, what do you got now we can turn into a movie? Not saying they won't. So yeah, the whole premise that Gerry says, yeah, we need to stop everything and just start over. Well, the problem is new markets just don't pop up overnight. If you decide to eviscerate everything you publish in well, we might get back into newsstands. No, you're not. Well, we might get a young public. No, you're not. I can almost guarantee you could publish the best youth comic book ever published, and you're not really going to get a lot out of it, because most youth don't buy comic books. Oh, sure, they'll pick up graphic novels, they'll go to the library, but the idea that you're going to get a month-to-month person like Cory and I, who will every month come back and buy the pamphlet form over and over and eventually wait and buy the graphic novel, yeah, that we're a dying market. We're a dying group. I'm not saying there aren't people behind us, but there aren't many. When I happen to be at the source on New Comic Book Day, yeah, I see guys with their families but I don't see a lot of kids jumping in to buy the latest Spider-Man. They may buy My Little Pony, or they may buy I don't know, something catching their eye, maybe Rick and Morty or something like that. But they're not going to. It's a pie in the sky thinking, and Cory and I talk about it periodically, and we come back to the same topic every time. You just can't overnight create new markets. I speak in frustration because I tried doing that with hot comics, where I thought, you know what, maybe I should do this and try to draw this traffic in. No, it didn't work. I had to work with the customers I had, toys and comics. For me to jump into games was kind of useless because the source had that market. Just like if the source tried to jump in to do games when I had hot comics or toys, they didn't have the space, they didn't have the expertise, they didn't want to play with the markup. So yeah, I think that's old man wishful thinking in terms of let's kill the spotted calf. I just don't understand why every time somebody comes up with an idea, the first thing out of their mouth is, we got to kill the direct market. Got to kill Diamond Comics. We got to kill, no. Let it go on. I mean, and it will keep going until it eventually collapses under its own weight, or maybe it'll keep going. Every so often, I thought last couple of years, COVID year excluded, every time you were reading sales on comics, Cory, you were saying, well, they're up by this amount percent. Comics were going up, graphic novels were going up. So yeah, maybe they'd slid down so low, but yeah, you're not going to get a $1 million comic book event. I think Star Wars 1 was the last one, wasn't it?
Yeah, and that was mostly driven by Loot Crate.
Yeah.
Because if Loot Crate picked up a book, it would sell 500,000 copies. Another thing that I don't want to be a jerk, but Marvel and DC are already doing this. DC has spent the last year getting into the young adult market, and if you look at their publishing plan since Dan DiDio was let go, they're moving more into the young adult market. They're publishing more books in that. Marvel has been pushing into that market. It just infuriates me how many comic fans and even older creators don't understand that Marvel has done incredible work getting into the Scholastic Book Fair, which is still around, which is the publisher for Harry Potter, which is the publisher for Renee Zellweger. When I was a kid, every month, here you go, here's the Scholastic Book Fair, order form. Marvel has reformatted stuff to fit that. Squirrel Girl went 49 issues. They're reformatting that because it sells in that market. They're putting out these, if you look at the Marvel solicitation, the very last thing they have are these, they're not digests, they're a little bigger than digests, but it's reformatting the older stuff that's tying into movies now or is aimed at younger readers, like Ms. Marvel, like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, like Miles Morales, like Captain Marvel. They're reformatting, they're putting it there. Does it sell well in the direct market? Oh no, the direct market's your He-Man Women's Haters Club. But if they sell 50, 60, 70, 100,000 copies through schools, or the library market is massive. My son got married at the library in St. Peter, Minnesota. His wife works at that library, and she's kind of in charge of the young adult area. And I went and I looked, and they didn't have as much manga because they found that manga disappears from the shelves without being checked out.
It's that small format, fits in a pocket very well. Oops, how did that get in there?
But do they have the Renee Zellweger stuff? Do they have the stuff by Dev Patel like Captain Underpants and Dogman? Do they have the Marvel books that are that size? Do they have the self-contained DC stuff? Do they have pretty much the entire run of the DC young adult stuff? Yes, they do. And she said it's really popular. It checks out a lot. You talked about when you were trying to read Ms. Marvel through the library, and most of the time they were checked out. Marvel gets a piece of that because the library sales are going to be much bigger than the direct market. There's a reason why when Joe Quesada is asked about this, he says, "Are you kidding? Our sales are better than they've ever been." Because we just look at the direct market. We don't look at Amazon, Scholastic, libraries, Barnes and Noble. Do you think Barnes and Noble would have their graphic novel section as large as their science fiction section if that stuff wasn't selling? If that stuff wasn't selling, it would be gone in a month. In big stores, shelf space is power. So next time you go to a Barnes & Noble, take a look. Which section is bigger, romance or graphic novels? Which section is bigger, literature or graphic novels? It's where the money goes, that's where the shelf space goes. Will the direct market fade away? We've talked for years about how it will probably fade away. There will probably be, DC is already moving toward a new paradigm. Marvel will probably move toward a new paradigm as well, because the paradigm they've been using of, okay, the monthly books, and then we have, when we have an event, we have tie-in miniseries so that when big book A comes out, there's little books B. And that's a standard publishing thing. If there's a huge success like Harry Potter, there are 15 books like it. Like, I can't even think of them all. But if you want to see something fun, go to a used science fiction bookstore and look at fantasy novels published in the 70s. You had Lord of the Rings, which sold cajillions of copies, and then you had tons and tons and tons of fantasy trilogies that were pretty much knockoffs. One of them even made a ton of money and got a TV series, Sword of Shannara. I remember when Sword of Shannara came out in like 79. It was based on, the writer went and said, okay, here's my outline. The brothers Hildebrandt, who'd done a bunch of Lord of the Rings paintings, did a bunch of paintings for the book, and he wrote a story that was almost Lord of the Rings with different characters. He has since expanded on it, and it's now like this huge 20-book thing. But I can't even tell you how many fantasy series, when I would go to Uncle Hugo's, it's like, oh, here's 3 books that look like Lord of the Rings, and here's another 3 books that look like Lord of the Rings, and another 3 books that look like... The issue with comics publishing is the old model. Back in the 70s, what could have happened is that they went all in on the black and white magazines, where instead they just kind of dipped their toe in it. And the problem with the black and white magazines was they were on shitty, cheap paper, and they didn't sell ads.
But they were fun if you had some silly putty. You could entertain yourself all afternoon. I tried that on my copy of Spawn #1. It just doesn't work.
But just think if they would have had the slick paper like Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal had a movie 3 years after the magazine started.
It was a one-way ticket to ride.
And that is my response to Gerry Conway. Joe, do you have anything more to add?
I added mine.
Okay.
You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just fill up the tub again. And they were doing it.
Now, normally, I would put in ads here.
Yes, we what?
But from now until the election, we are giving our ads over to asking people to vote. This election here in the U.S. is one of the most important elections ever. Last election, over 100 million people who could vote didn't. If you don't vote, you really shouldn't complain about how things have gone. But there is so much at stake at this election. There is so much going on at this election, and not just at the presidential level, but all the way down. We are determining what's going to be happening in this country for the next 20 to 40 years. So if you haven't registered or you don't know how to register, go to betterknowaballot.com. Put in your state, and Stephen Colbert has a video for how you can register, how you can vote early, or how you can vote the day of. Joe, do you have anything to add?
No.
And that's what we're going to be doing. And then after the election, we've done this the last couple of years. If you know of a charity that you think needs some more attention, let us know at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. And we will have it, because for the last 2 months of the year, because we're in the giving spirit, and we kind of have to make up for the negativity of the Festivus show, our ads are turned over to charities that we feel are important. So if you have a charity that you feel is important, let us know at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. I do a bunch of other podcasts, and I talk about them right here.
We have been asked to give our experience with the Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie. That was from '94, right?
Give or take.
Yeah. Joe owned a comic shop in St. Paul, Comic St. Paul at the time. And we had the actor, Alex Hyde White, there for...
Hi, Alex.
He was going to
We know
be
you're
signing.
listening.
Oh, by the way,
that night was going...
we were supposed to have
the next day was going to be the premiere
we
of
were
the Mall of
supposed to
America.
have we were supposed to have the actor who played the Thing as well.
Oh, Michael Bailey Smith.
However, he got a paying gig, so he couldn't do the tour. What they were doing, and this was so rare,
I would have liked to have met
the
him.
actors were
He was
doing
cool.
ground level. They were going to comic shops trying to drum up support for this movie.
He wasn't there. Who was the guy in the Thing mask?
I don't know.
That was you.
Oh, what a doofus.
So we get a call, and I don't know, it had to have been from the Publicist, whatever. So they were setting up, they had 3 stores in town. He went to Comic Archives, Hot Comics St. Paul, and then Hot Comics Edina.
He did, huh? He hit all those places?
Yep. So he would come, there'd be movie props, we'd set up the signing, they'd talk. So basically, I remember the Publicist, saying, this is amazing that the actors are willing to do this, to go to stores to try to drum up ground level support. Because, face it was a Roger Corman movie, it was low budget. They're just trying to get people excited about it. And it didn't cost us anything. With the stores that got involved, then we would be a part of the red carpet premiere, which would happen at Mall of America's Planet Studio.
Planet Hollywood.
Oh, Planet Hollywood, thank you. And, you walk down the carpet, you're part of the advertising, you get to see the movie on the big screen. So it was like, hey, whatever, it sounds like fun.
Oh, that was great.
I forget the name of the magazine. Was it Fantasy Illustrated or something?
Film Threat.
Film Threat had a cover article. I think this was before the movie came out.
Yes.
So there was like something to have and sign and whatever. So Thursday he was going to Comic Archives. I mean, one of these days, if we'd ever get Brent Moore to come and talk to us, he can tell us what happened down there.
Brent.
He came to our store and then went to the Edina shop on Saturday. So, number one problem was we had a snowstorm coming through on Friday. So I knew right away that was going to kill any enthusiasm, to come out in a snowstorm and check it out. And it was a crappy Minnesota winter day, probably ice rain, I don't remember. I remember picking him up at the hotel he stayed at. I don't think it might have been the Thunderbird. It might have been the one across from it at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And
Days in.
we drove back, and he was real curious, how the turnout would be. Would it be any good?
Nope.
And the problem was, I was like real apprehensive because of the lack of cooperative weather. As my recollection of the signing was, he was set up in the back of the store. He brought the Thing's head because, as you said, the other actor couldn't come. And I believe the Human Torch and the Invisible Girl.
He had a prop up of the Doctor Doom mask too that could sit
Yeah.
on the
they,
table with them.
They also were working, which is why they didn't tour.
Or we could have gotten the whole Fantastic Four and
That
the
would have
jeweler.
been, that would have been pretty sweet.
Oh, the jeweler.
Yeah.
That jeweler.
One of the greatest villains of all time.
Yep.
So
I bet.
he came, he did the signing. I've got pictures on. If you go to my Facebook page, Joseph Ryder, or it says Joe Crazy Ryder, and go to my albums under Hot Comics, you'll see pictures of the actual signing. Butch in a thing mask, my partner Pat, myself, Alex Hyde White, a couple other shots as well.
Polaroid, Ma.
Yeah, fading Polaroids. You fancy kids and your digital cameras. Anyways, my recollection, it went okay. I mean, he wasn't in the best of moods. It was kind of a bust in terms of the signing. A few people came in. There were a few autographs. Afterwards, I took everybody involved out to eat. Now, what I didn't realize is apparently when I wasn't around, and neither Pat, Mr. White apparently was really talking smack about Gruber. Because my partner at the time was a 300-pound baby-faced Muppet, to put kindly.
And who knew him from appearances on Battlestar Galactica?
And
other appearances, yeah, right.
So, all I know is one of the guys
Apparently
who
didn't
was
like
our
the fans.
customers wasn't very appreciative of what Mr. White was talking smack on Gruber. Oh, take him outside and smack him. It's like, well, thank God he didn't. But, again, the signing was okay. There were a few people, a bad day, and then afterwards we took everybody out to dinner. At the dinner, we had to stop and get his girlfriend, and that's why I remember waiting. I don't know who. Did either you guys, did you come to dinner with us?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we came. Okay, so we came. We were at dinner.
So, stopping at that point, let's get back to the shop. What was your recollection of the signing? If any.
Anything, Cory? You got it?
I remember it was new. That was back when comics still came out on a Friday, and I didn't even know that the guy was going to be there, and I was hoping at the shop. Yeah, but I was there all the time.
It really happened fast, so there wasn't time to hey guys, this is happening next week. Let's do some flyers. Again, no interwebs, you fancy kids, no social media. So yeah, it was pretty much. I was counting on the fact we get a lot of people because it was free comic book day. That's why I chose
comic book day.
new comic book day. Anyways, continue.
And a few people asked him. Butch, of course, had kind of done what he does with all guests. Butch kind of adopted him and just kind of hung out at the table, shooting the breeze with him because there weren't a lot of people coming up for autographs. I remember I asked a few questions about, the production and everything, and he was polite enough, but you could tell that he would much rather have been anywhere else on this planet.
Well, and I think also, he was doing it with his bud, and then all of a sudden his bud had to cancel, and I was like, oh God, I'm tied into doing it alone. Now here's the best news. In between, I don't know if this occurred while he was there, or if it occurred between our signing and the dinner. But he found out 20th Century Fox bought the rights to the film. They bought the rights to Fantastic Four, bought the rights to the film, and they were shelving it.
Yeah.
So basically everything he's been doing, including this signing, and I should mention we didn't pay anything for the signing. It was all part of the studio's push. And he still had one more signing to do tomorrow. Was for nothing. So all their work, all the excitement, all the ground support, nothing. It was being bought, it was being shelved. We didn't know about we pretty much figured, the walking the red carpet, the grand opening, Hot Comics being a big part of it, Comic Archives being part of it. Meh. So going to dinner, he was not in the best of moods. What do you recall about at the shop?
I don't remember much about it.
Of course, you were in that thing mask a long time. You might have had some oxygen.
Yeah, these was early mask wearing problems. He lost me when there was this nice guy that used to come in the shop with his kid, right? And they were pretty enthusiastic about him being there, and and asking him a lot of questions and stuff, and you could just tell he wasn't into it, you know. I remember at one point him telling them that the trailer was up at the front of the shop, and they thought he was talking about an actual trailer, so they're looking out in the parking lot, you know. But Joe had the little TV up in the corner, and we were running the trailer on a videotape, if you guys remember that.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was just one trailer,
Yeah.
and then we'd rewind it. And
Yeah, it was set to rewind. And
anybody who wanted to watch it. But anyway, after a while, that guy and his kid were back there, and talking to him again. And I remember him going to the kid, come here, okay, come here. And he took his permanent marker that he was signing nothing with because there was nobody there, and he drew down the middle of the kid's nose with the permanent marker. And I thought, you dick.
That's funny.
So fuck you, Alex Hyde White.
Yeah!
Little prick.
And that was before dinner. So at dinner...
Here's your thing,
At
mask.
dinner, of course, he dropped the news. He was telling us about it. Obviously not happy. He's in the middle of Minnesota in a snowstorm, and everything they've been working for is for nothing. They still got one more signing to do. Whatever. It was game over. I do know at the dinner, though, I talked with him a lot and just tried to talk to him about acting, getting into it. You know, I said, you know, how I see different actors appearing on, like, certain actors would appear on this show and on this show and on this show because they were all being filmed by Paramount. And then you kind of, Paramount. I hadn't thought about going over there yet. And, you know, that was pretty much it. It came, it went. It was just a minor blip. And
he was wearing boots that you've never seen anybody else wear. I got it.
Okay. So, yeah, it was kind of... It was cool because it was free. It had the potential to be a little bit more.
Not that the boots weren't cool.
No. They brought the mask. So, yeah, I dropped them off, and that was it. I have no idea how it went at Hot Comics. Maybe I'll drop a Visa line and see how it went the next day. But, yeah, it was one of those things where, you know, I feel bad for the guy. I mean, I know he was kind of a dork to people, but, you know, you work hard, you're doing all that stuff, and that's like, it's all for naught anyways.
You're hanging by a thread just to begin with. Being in a Roger Corman Fantastic
And then
Four
I think
movie.
you, as a epilogue, or how do you say, what's the little end piece on Coda?
Coda, epilogue.
Addendum.
You brought in, I believe, a bootleg copy of the movie that we did on our bad movie sale.
I did. Picked that up at the Chicago Comic Convention.
Yep, we played also, we had
I
bad
think.
movies, Jesse Ventura's Abracus, we had the Star Wars Holiday Special, we had
Skippy.
yeah.
Boris and Natasha.
Oh my gosh, we played on, yeah, that was fun. We never did get to do Cory's idea, Son of Bad Movie Sale, but
Children shouldn't play with dead things.
and that's pretty much our. I remember doing a newsletter for No More, how everything was canceled and blah blah blah.
Also, I believe you used the picture of somebody in the Thing mask for your picture in one of the retailer magazines.
Yeah, which started off a whole avalanche there, but that's a different story.
Of people sending in oddball pictures.
Yeah, instead of their regular picture. I said, I don't want to see my picture in a magazine.
Hell.
So
Send that guy's picture.
well.
Joe, let's make some money. What's going on the eBays?
Oh, all sorts of stuff. Tremendous stuff. Amazing stuff. Did I tell you about Amazing Heroes 45?
There's an Amazing Heroes 45?
Yep, from 1984. Did I tell you why it's over $200-300?
No.
Apparently. Well, let me just read here on one of the pages here. It goes, just what we need. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird are the creative team behind Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a 40-page black and white comic selling for $1.50 or $2 postpaid from Mirage Studios. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles introduces 4 teenage turtles who have been trained in the ways of ninjas and are also mutants, altered in form and intelligence by a mysterious radioactive ooze. And right across from it is an ad featuring our boys. It is the first published appearance of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Now, Amazing Heroes was a magazine that came out, I think in 84 it was weekly, because it had a list of everything coming out that week.
Bi-weekly.
And it had interviews with creators. It had all sorts of fun stuff. I mean, this was before the internet kids. So this was kind of a way to figure out what was going on, especially if you weren't picking up previews or advanced comics or what was
Comic
Heroes
Buyer's
World
Guide.
or Hero. There was the Heroes Worlds. I can't remember what their magazine was called, but and you wanna know where I picked up my copy?
And where was that?
Remember when we were digging through 50-cent books back at the
Oh, yeah.
on our geeking day? Yeah. So once again, I luck out, baby. Woo! Who's the man? Who's the man? Hey, if you want it, it's up on the eBays. And of course, I'm the cheapest one in town. Well, on the eBays, anyways. And believe me, when I say cheap, compared to some of the other prices, because people have got this thing priced into the thousands. So again, before you throw anything out, check it out, because you never know what hidden gems might be in it. Speaking of hidden gems, I did sell some stuff. And although Cory forgot, Cory, remember when we talked about Barbie twins?
Yes.
Okay, that was when I was telling you we got to work on our new segment. Have you ever heard of? Where we talk about, and this is where the secondary mission of our podcast, as we know it, is pretty much turning into mentioning one of every single title that's ever been published in comics. And today we're actually, well, we're already 2 ahead, 3 because I mentioned Turtles. How about Fantasy Masterpieces? Cory, you know about this one, Volume 2, right?
Fantasy Masterpieces Volume 2 started as reprinting Silver Surfer stories, and it was double-sized because the original Silver Surfer stories were double-sized. But when Silver Surfer went down to single, kind of a regular comic size, they had to put something in the back. So what did they do? Poorly printed reprints of Jim Starlin's Warlock.
Yeah. And some of these issues are pretty pricey, which is amazing. I mean, I sold a number 4, which is the reprint of Silver Surfer Volume 1, number 4, where it's Thor versus Silver Surfer.
One of John Buscema's best art pieces. And have I ever told you the behind-the-scenes story of that?
Nope.
Buscema really wanted Silver Surfer to succeed. And he felt that, fans were a little upset because it wasn't Kirby. So on that one, he knocked himself out. He wanted to do the best art job possible. And when he turned it in, Stan said, this isn't as good as your previous stuff. It broke his heart to the point where he decided at that point he wasn't going to put that much effort into anything else. He changed his mind when he got the black and white stuff because it reprinted better. But he in his interviews, he talked about how it just took the wind out of his sails. Now, John Buscema was a guest at the 2001 San Diego Comic-Con, which is the one we went to, Joe. I brought my Silver Surfer masterwork there. And when I saw him, I asked him to sign that Silver Surfer number 4. And I said, you've said that this is one of your favorite jobs. I'd like you to sign this because I think it's one of your best art jobs too. And he signed, he didn't personalize it or anything because, he didn't have much time. It was just, John Buscema. But I was just happy that I was able to acknowledge that to him, which I imagine tons of people did. But imagine knocking yourself out on some art and thinking this is the best I've ever done, and your boss goes,
I've done better. Well,
so
Stanley wasn't always right.
No.
Cory, did you ever read the last Avengers story?
Yes.
Yep.
I know it was written by Peter David. I don't remember who drew it, though.
Ariel Avaletti?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So
Yep.
It looked painted.
Only 2 issues and a book if you want to if you can find the collected book. I mean, guide's about $60. The series itself, 1 and 2, run about $20. So I'll mention this when we get to geeking. I figured a way what they should be doing with it. But I had 1 set left, and I done sell it. Speaking of crossovers, Secret Invasion Frontline. Frontline was a number of series that would go on during a major crossover event, which was kind of cool. And it covered it from the reporter's viewpoint, trying to cover the story. And it was kind of cool. So of all the crossovers that ever go on, the front lines are ones I tend to pick up just because I enjoyed them a little bit more. And this particular one was based on Marvel Invasion, and 2008, 2009, only 5 issues on that one. Marvel Spotlight, number 31. Let's see if Cory knows. Who was in Marvel? This is volume 1, Marvel Spotlight, number 31.
Well, because Marvel Spotlight Volume 2 only went 11 issues. Number 31 was, I believe it wasn't Spider-Woman.
Oh.
Was it Deathlock or was it Spider-Woman?
Nope. It was Nick Fury.
Nick Fury.
Yep.
The Affinity Formula story. I knew because 31 was supposed to be Spider-Woman, but they didn't have it done in time. So there was a fill-in, and it was that Nick Fury Infinity Formula story, which explained why he was still young after having served in World War II.
Yeah, and it's just a couple hacks. I mean, Jim Starlin wrote it, Howard Chaykin did the art, so yeah, it never lasts.
Yeah.
Number 32, I wish I had. That was first appearance of Spider-Woman. Easily in the $300 range now if you have yours in mint shape. So if you don't, you might have a copy. Have you heard of Dark Swan from Rochelle Mead?
No.
Well, this is a series. It was it's a series of books, and they did a 4-issue comic series from Sea Lion, and it's basically a best-selling author, Rochelle Mead, of urban fantasy books for both teens and adults. In this particular one, let's see, Eugene Markham never asked for any of this. Until now, she's been content with her job as a freelance shaman, battling and banishing otherworldly creatures. When a prophecy suddenly makes her the otherworld's most popular bachelorette, Eugene finds herself fighting off unwanted supernatural suitors, as well as the evil that begins emerging from her past. I had sold the hardcover book, which, although it prices for $19, if you luck out, you can probably find it. I got mine for $3 somewhere. But I doubled it with an incentive cover from number 1 that Rochelle herself signed. So I paid a nice little set for the eBays there. It's almost, that's a case of here's a hot property in the literary world, and in the comic world, it barely made a splash. Unlike the next one I sold, which was Anita Blake, Vampire Hunter, Guilty Pleasures number 1. How could you lose with Peter David writing it? A whole series came out under the Dabble Brothers line. I believe that was Marvel, wasn't it?
Yes.
And Laurel K. Hamilton wrote a lot of it.
She wrote the books that they are based on.
Yeah. They have her down as writing Guilty Pleasures, too. But I thought it was Peter David helped adapt it. I don't know.
What it was, she wrote the novel and he adapted it into a comic.
Okay. And again, here's a property that was really hot, sold really fast, and then just kind of burned out. The last one I sold, I gave a deal on it, although I maybe wish I didn't later. Witches 1 through 6 from Image. It was published 2014-15, only 6 issues, a book, and a dabbling of specials, but it's basically when the Rooks family moves to the remote town of Litchfield, New Hampshire, to escape a haunting drama. They're hopeful about starting over, but something evil is waiting for them in the woods just beyond town, watching from the trees, ancient, and it's hungry. And it's allegedly being made into a movie or a Netflix series or something, so people are speculating like crazy on this one. Well, I did too. I sold mine off. And I figured, you know what? That's it. I got tons of stuff I put up, and there'll be tons more on by the time you get to listen to this here podcast. As usual, if you see something you really, really like, send me a message that you're interested, that you listen to this here podcast. That's the number one thing. Because I had somebody give me an offer. I declined it because it was ridiculously cheap. And I thought you said if you listen to the show, you get an offer. I said, aha, but you didn't tell me you listen to that. So you don't get the offer. Yes, I can be mean and capricious. No, he never replied. But anyways, that's the key. Just send me a message that you're interested in it. It actually worked. One of the guys who, I believe, what's that Facebook group? Minnesota. Oh, hang on a second while I fire up the Kraython 3000.
There are so many of them, it's hard to know.
There are, and this one is just Minnesota Comic Squad, and they had a separate page to list eBay stuff, and I did, and one of the guys said, "Hey, would you take this for that?" And I done did, because that's the way I roll, especially the people I know who listen to this here podcast. You know where to go, Crazy, Krayz. Come get some.
And now we get to my favorite part of the
Fire
show.
alarm? Slinky time. We're walking on stairs, a loner in pairs, a slinkity sound.
No, not where I troll eBay to see if I can find cheap omnibuses. Oh, look, droids and Ewoks for $15.
Woohoo!
No, it's freaking and geeking. Joe, what are you freaking on?
My plans failed.
You have plans?
Yeah, no, I took off Saturday, as you know. I mentioned it last podcast, didn't I? The bid I got and where I ended up.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to Checkpoint. I got the same days off, but I figured, you know what? When I'm at Checkpoint, I probably won't get as many opportunities to take the day off. Although, well, that's the second. It's getting ugly in the airline industry. I mean, we're waiting a side batch, or how did they say it? Digression.
Sidebar.
It's going to get ugly. I mean, the traffic was up a little, but you got to remember traffic dropped about 90%. So anywhere is good. But we are waiting to see if Washington, D.C. is going to actually help bail out airlines and airports. Again, because if they don't, the bloodletting is going to start. You're talking pilots are going to be let out. Airline attendants are going to go. The people who work these minimum wage job at airports are going to be let go. You're going to go to your friendly neighborhood airport and there's going to be nothing to eat or nothing to look at. All those businesses are going to be closed or gone. How's that going to affect TSA? No clue. But I can guarantee you they're not going to keep all of us around, especially if there's nobody flying. For Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, it's acute because we're a major Delta hub, but the biggest Delta hub is Atlanta. And we're really, really worried, and they're quietly lobbying Delta behind the scenes that Delta will decide to pull out and not fly as many things through Minneapolis as we do. We have more connecting passengers through our airport than we do originating. So things aren't good right now. A little brief glimmer. I had the question because as I mentioned before, we got 4 screening areas. 2 of them are shut down because 2 of them deal exclusively with international flights. We got no international flights coming in. They're flying to other airports. You want to fly international, you'll be sent to probably Atlanta or San Francisco or wherever and fly from there. But it does sound like Delta is going to fly in Amsterdam now directly to Minneapolis. I noticed that they're starting to test the belts that have been shut down for the last 4 months. And although they've cut a lot of us and we're all going to Checkpoint, I keep thinking next month when these flights come in, they're going to need people back in baggage. So maybe, just maybe, I will get to leave my Checkpoint and destiny and go back to baggage where I'd hope to hang till I retire. Or maybe I'll just say, screw it, stay where I am because I like my days off. I just don't know. So things are really up in the air. I have no idea what's going on. With that backdrop, I decided, you know what, I got some time. Let's take a day off. I was talking with my wife. I said, let's head up north and take the Superior Scenic Byway. Minnesota has a number of scenic byways. The North Shore is one. There's a St. Croix one I talked about in a previous podcast. This one starts from Aurora, Minnesota, and goes down to Silver Bay on the North Shore, or the other way around. We've driven it before. It's a nice highway, kind of boring, but boy, if fall colors were exploded, and northern Minnesota was peak fall colors last weekend from when we're recording this in September 28th. So they're saying this is it, peak colors up north. However, there were 2 problems we had. First of all, everybody knew this was peak color, so we couldn't find a room anywhere. So we weren't going to drive up, drive around, sleep overnight, come back. So I figured, let's get up at 6 a.m. We'll drive up because we could be up there in about 3 hours. Take a couple hours to drive the trail, a couple hours to go back, maybe the supper in Duluth, and then drive home. It'd be a long time driving, but we're big on that. We stop, make a lot of detours. However, Mother Nature decided to change it for us. All day Friday it rained and thunderstormed. All day Saturday it rained. Sunday it's been very windy. It was very windy Sunday here, even down in the Twin Cities. One thing you know about trees when they turn color is rain and wind makes them drop their leaves very fast. Because essentially when you get those colors, the tree's pretty much done with the leaf. It's just waiting to drop them. And so we were like, well, a couple friends went up north, and while they got some really cool shots of amazing fog, not so much fall colors. So that kind of fell through. It was a little, had I known or had I even looked at the weather forecast and thought, oh, it's going to be raining. Because, locally they're like, it's just going to be a few rain. You'll still get good colors. Nope, it rained. The entire northern Minnesota was covered in rain. So what did we do? Well, that's geeking. The other thing I'm gonna freak on is, and this is this is up to every single comic book store out there. I want you to just stop, listen to Joe here. I got something for you to say. I got something to say. People, stop packing your back issues so damn tightly in your back issue bins. Hot Comics, Source. Oh my God, everybody I go to, Comic College. Yes, I understand because I'm an ex-retailer, so I do understand. You got to fit as much as you can. But when you put so many issues in there that I have to damage them to try to flip through them, or worse, I got to take a batch out just so I can get to be able to flip to see what the hell the issue number is. And then I have trouble trying to jam all those issues back into the space you provided. No, that's very, very poor retailing. I don't care what your rationale is. If I can't look at what you've got there, I'll just say screw it and move back to eBay, where I can look at something and decide whether I want it. I swear, that's the one thing I absolutely hate about comic retailing. And almost every store I've been to lately does it. Even when I had Hot Comics, I always had to chide the people loading the bins. Do not pack them so tight that you cannot look at them, because what happens, and I see this especially when I look at the source, those first issues in that particular row are bent in half because people are bending them over trying to get to the issues behind them. I'm not going to buy that issue when you bend it in half, unless it happens to be Amazing Fantasy 15, and then I'm not giving you mint price for it. So yeah, just remember, if you can't look at the titles and the cover properly, you're packing them too damn tight. If you don't have room for all your back issues, hey, maybe you better get rid of some of them. Maybe you better reprice them, or maybe you better have a damn sale where you blow the shit out. And some of the stores are doing that, but again, that's on the geeking side of the program. Cory, what you freaking on?
I have the Mr. Miracle book that I've been reading. The first story in it is a story for Mr. Miracle showing up in Brave and the Bold. Now, Joe, in the 70s, Brave and the Bold was a Batman team-up book. Most every issue was drawn by Jim Aparo, so it looks great. Most every story was written by Bob Haney, who could not give less of a shit about continuity or anything else.
Pretty much.
The Mr. Miracle part of the story, he didn't understand the character at all. But reading the story, he didn't even understand the goddamn Batman. So Batman and Commissioner Gordon are walking around, and Batman says, "My bat senses are telling me something."
I have bat senses. I better walk around the Batcave without my pants on. No, wait, that was different decade.
And I swear it broke my brain. It was like I closed the book. I silently cursed that Bob Haney was ever allowed to write stuff other than, his stuff in the anthology books is great. He could write a good one, a good horror story, a good war story, a good science fiction story. But he would just make up shit like that, and it hurts. So for Gerry Conway to go and talk about how, well, it was better when we aimed stuff at kids, Even if I were 8, I would go, no, man, no, that's bullshit. No.
And even I recognize on some of these where, like, I think we talked about it in the past, like, oh, Batman's teaming up with Wildcat. Wait a minute, they're on different Earths. Well, I just filled in the gap. Wildcat, for whatever reason, jumped into transporter, decided to go to Earth 1.
Yeah.
You know, because I was aware of that. But again, a lot of it just didn't make sense. There are some pretty good stories. I do love the Batman Supergirl crossovers. But who knows? Maybe if we ever get a decent omnibus of that, we'll revisit all these stories. What worked?
They're coming out with the final Brave and the Bold omnibus. It's 3 omnibuses.
Fun.
And I have the first 2.
Okay,
I have the first 2.
I better get to the eBays.
And the other thing that I'm freaking on, I'm not working as much at the group home. Usually it's a 1 weekend shift. They don't need me on weekdays that much anymore. For now, I can tell you right now, after working with some of the staff they've hired, it's not going to last, so I'm going to enjoy it while I can. But one thing I've noticed is if I am working a weekend shift, I had damn well better plan to be there all day. Because the last 3 times I've gone in, it's, I'm going to be here from like 7 until 2. No. You're there till the overnight staff comes in because the other staff calls in sick or their car's broken or something happened or they do a no-call, no-show. The last 3 shifts. This weekend, no-call staff, their car was broken, and I had already come in early because the morning staff had called in sick. They were like, is there any way you could come in early? I could come in at 9. Why did I choose 9? Because at 9 o'clock, everybody's up, had their breakfast and morning pills, and I don't have to deal with that, especially if I'm going to be there in the evening. But nope, I was there from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. because the other staff who was supposed to work from 2 to 10 did not show. And I worked alone from 2 in the afternoon until 9 at night. Now, thankfully, it's only 3 clients, and they all have to be hand-fed, so it took an hour and a half to get everybody their supper. It took, it took me another hour and a half to get them in their pajamas and get them into bed, because it was just me, baby, just me. It's a little exhausting. Joe, what are you geeking on?
No, as I'm looking, I can see I can pick up the Brave and Bold omnibuses fairly cheap, but I'm a little miffed because I guess this will be an extended freaking because my in-stock trade order for my Invincible hardcovers is kind of in limbo. I placed it 9 days ago, and although they confirmed it, they haven't filled it.
They're probably waiting on them to come in from Diamond.
The hell kind of in-stock trades is this? Whatever. I waited
in stock at Diamond.
I waited 6 months for my Dynamic Forces order to get here. I suppose I can wait for Invincible. I mentioned geeking. What we did do. So my wife and I, we got up. We went to Pine Tree Orchard again, which is a fabulous place. It was a little bit of a line to get in, but boy, it took us less time to get what we wanted and get the hell out of there because. We're not there to walk through the corn maze or do the hay ride, which I don't even know if they had, or look at the apple sorting machine, which is pretty cool, or do the corn maze. Nope, we came in, we got our donuts, apple turnovers, cookies, apples, pie, a couple other fun things. We're out of there. We even got some pie to eat when we were in the car. I do miss having the heated pie and ice cream, but with the whole social distancing thing, that's not happening. But no, I was surprised. We got there. There was a lineup. We're in, we're out. And judging by the way we're eating and all this stuff, we'll probably make another visit. So that was kind of fun. We went to Target. We did our Target shopping. Folks, you know shit's going to hit the fan with this COVID stuff again, right? When we're all indoors. Way back in February, I don't think I talked about it on the podcast, but I know I talked about it afterwards, how I was telling my family, we need to just be ready for another 2-3 week shutdown. We don't have to go hoard stuff, but buy 1 thing of ibuprofen, buy 2. You have it ready. You need 1 batch of Band-Aids, get 2. Plan for things. What if you can't get out of the house for 2 weeks? Again, if you're in a place where there's snowstorms or hurricanes or any type of natural disaster, earthquakes, or you happen to live in Salt Lake City, because the Mormons, that's part of what you're supposed to do is be ready for an emergency. Be prepared, the old Boy Scout mantra. So while we're doing that, it's like pulling teeth because nobody wants to spend the extra money here. But I'm like, we got to get it ready to go. We got enough food in here to last. And, with the exception of fresh veggies, fruits, and things like milk or other perishables, we're probably pretty good. And we got meat, we got things we can cook, we can bake. But just be ready. It's coming. I mean, I've got tons of comics to read, so I'm set for that. But just be prepared because the expert, it's right now it's being drowned out because of the election and bad tax returns and whatever the news du jour is for the day. But that report was there, so it's coming. So just be prepared. Download some of our beloved episodes. So if the power does go out, because it happened last week, we woke up and it's like, holy cow, the power's out. You know what I'm going to do? Sit on the porch and use the sunlight to read comics with. And I was able to slip my Diet Mountain Dew out of the fridge without too much hassle either. But anyways, power's on a few minutes later. So anyways, after we went to Target, part of the Target thing is we bring my father-in-law some stuff because he's in his 90s. It's hard for him to get up and out, so he appreciates that. And we got home, and then a friend of mine posts on his Facebook page. He's at his place a couple hours into Wisconsin where they cooked the brisket, and they get ready to eat it. And I go, "Oh, it looks good. Maybe we should head on over." And he goes, "Come on over. It's got to last 2 hours or sit for 2 hours." And my wife and I, well, we shouldn't do it. I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then she said, "You know what? What would the shot say?" Cory, you remember that, right? What would the shot say?
Yes.
Yep.
Say yes.
William Shatner said, always say yes. That's how he got his Emmy in Brooklyn. No, what was it? Brain fart.
Boston Legal.
Thank you. Boston Legal. I was way up. I was way too north. He didn't want to do another series. He did Star Trek. He was happy doing what he was doing. But he said yes. If he hadn't said yes, he wouldn't have gotten an Emmy. He had a whole new group of fans cover him. That's why you see him in so many things, because he loves to say yes. So we did it, and we had a great time. It was just a lot of fun. And, again, seeing friends that we haven't seen before because of everything going on, it was just great. I mentioned The Last Avengers in my eBay segment. Has there been a Peter David omnibus, like the John Byrne 2-volume omnibus, where not his main stuff, not his Spider-Man, not his Hulk, not his X-Force or X-Factor, but just the other miscellaneous things he's done?
No.
Marvel, are you listening? We just gave you another $1 million idea. I expect my Peter Omnibus by the end of, let's see if they order it. Beginning of next year, it'll ship sometime 2022. That sounds good. I am fairly pleased with the state of comic industry, at least in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. I met a guy. I'm trying to find his store, but I don't know if it's open. I thought he said it was Final Fantasy Toys. I met him when I was geeking down at Steve Brown, a man about town at Cedar Cliff. And let me just go through the notes here. Final Fantasy Toys, which is what he wrote down. And it's supposed to be in Park Rapids. I don't know if it's open, but if you're up in the Park Rapids area and you see it, shoot us a line and let us know, because there's a store there. There's a comic shop in Bemidji. We haven't hit the one in Alexandria. I got another northern trip ready to roll, Cory. I'm also pleased to announce that Hot Comics New Hope's moving at the end of October to a bigger store. It's going to be 4400 Osseo Road in Minneapolis, which I guess isn't too far from where they are in New Hope. So I don't know if they're going to continue to be called New Hope or if they're going to change their name to Hot Comics Minneapolis. But they're discounting stuff and anticipating of moving. So somebody's listening to us. Nerding Out, our buddies down in Rochester, are going to be opening up in Inver Grove Heights this weekend. 9074 Buchanan Trail in Inver Grove Heights. Actually within spitting distance. There's an A&W restaurant that my wife and I go down to when we're in an A&W mood. And as we're driving by, I'm like, by God, that's the storefront right there. So, Cory, if you're free on Sunday, what do you think? Should we hit it?
I'm game.
All right. We might have we'll bring the recorder and we'll see if we can't get an exclusive interview. It's not really exclusive, but you know how we work. So, I haven't read much. I'm reading that Star Trek novel and that Cory borrowed me, and I'll talk more about that. I should be able to finish it pretty quick. The only other thing that I can talk about is I saw in a newspaper article, I think called My Octopus Teacher, which is a 2020 Netflix original documentary film directed by Pippa Elrich and James Reed. It stars Craig Foster, who helped produce the film. It's a year Foster spent with a wild octopus, followed it for pretty much all of its life. Basically, it's a combination where Foster's going through some personal trauma, and so he free dives in a cold water kelp forest off the tip of South Africa, where he has, I guess, his property. And he started to film his experiences, and he ran into a curious young octopus, and he visited her den and tracked her movements every day for months, and eventually won the animal's trust, where the animal would come out and touch him with the tentacles, and as the octopus went about her everyday life, would allow Craig to follow along and film. Really fascinating because he catches things we'd never seen before. The octopus defends herself against, I think it's Pigajama sharks, where they hunt by smell. One attacks the octopus and tears an arm off, and then she retreats to her den to recover, and you see the arm regenerating. Later, when he first sees her, she's got these stones and rocks and things, and it's just kind of a weird ball, and he just kind of followed it as the octopus got up on two of her tentacles and ran across the seafloor, not realizing, he could follow. He had no idea how the hell she got this way. Later on, when filming a thing with sharks, basically the shark hunts by scent, and as the octopus realizes, hey, I'm being hunted, well, I've said too much. But if you know anything about the life of octopus, they mate, they produce eggs, they die after a year. So again, it's kind of bittersweet because as you're watching, you really get attached because octopuses are scarily intelligent, just amazing. And Foster, he describes the effect of his experience with the octopus, with the relationship he had with his son's development. All in all, a fairly enjoyable, I think, an hour, 40 minutes. And again, just another show right on. And it's only two people in the cast, Craig Foster and the little octopus. So you don't have to follow a huge cast. So almost perfect for me. My Octopus Teacher, like I said, it's now on Netflix. Caught a few more episodes of Lucifer. We really are going slow with this because we know we could just binge it all and get it over with. People, I'm giving you advance warning. We're only on episode 4. At the rate we're going, I'll give you an advance warning. Probably about 2-3 weeks out, I'll be blabbing more about this. I just don't want to be a spoiler guy. I went through 2019. I didn't get any Avengers spoilers, and despite the hip operation, I was able to see Star Wars without any spoilers, and I fully expected it because I figured I wasn't going to recover. But I went and saw it 3 days after I had my operation done, so I was pretty happy with that. That's pretty much it for geeking. Cory, what you geeking on?
Joe, you know that I'm not a big guy on trailers because in a lot of ways,
you don't even have a trailer hitch on your car. I don't know how you're going to carry all these comic books we're going to pick up when we go geeking next.
But movie trailers and stuff, they show way too much of the movie now. So did you see the new blah blah blah? No.
Nope.
I'll see an ad on TV maybe, but I don't want things spoiled. Well, I saw the WandaVision trailer.
Okay. Oh. I gotta write that down. I haven't even seen it yet.
It doesn't give anything away, and it makes you go, I don't know what's going on, but it looks so cool.
Maybe Fergie's got something going here where he says, no, let's just stick with live action and not too animated.
Yep. So
although I did want to see the Howard the Duck by Kevin Smith.
Really, really fun trailer. Lots of cool stuff going on in it too. So my box day showed up. Joe, you know how much I love my crime stories. and I love
Oh, yeah.
my hard-boiled detective stories. IDW put out a book called The Complete Johnny Dynamite. Johnny Dynamite was a comic from the 50s that was pretty much a knockoff of Mike Hammer, which was one of the first hard-boiled, detective. More of the, you had the hard-boiled detective noir stuff before that with Raymond Chandler, but Mickey Spillane injected more violence and more sex. It made it more. Nick always used to call them trucker fiction when he'd get those books, but it's men's adventure fiction. Johnny Dynamite was a comic that was, for the most part, a knockoff of Mike Hammer, to the point where I think one of the early stories, I'm reading it now, is like, oh, that's a complete ripoff of I, the Jury. So, but there's a complete book out. Max Allan Collins, who writes Ms. Tree and is completing a lot of the Mickey Spillane novels that weren't done when he was passed away, writes some fantastic mystery novels of his own. He writes an introduction, as does our pal, Scary Terry Beatty, who drew Ms. Tree, is now currently drawing, what is it, Rex? What is the Dr. Rex web comic strip in the newspaper? Dr. Rex Morgan.
Yeah.
He does that, but he also did covers for Scary Monsters for 20 years. Also a big fan of detective stories and things like that. And then they also reprint the Ms. Tree meets Johnny Dynamite story that they did in the Ms. Tree Quarterly. Loving that book. The reproduction is not the best in the world, but I doubt there are really good scans available of those because they didn't sell all that well. And the last thing I'm geeking on, Joe, listen to this. That is the Volume 1 Green Arrow Longbow Hunters Saga, Omnibus Volume 1, the Mike Grell Green Arrow. It has the Longbow Hunters, Secret Origins 38, and Green Arrow 1 through 50. This is the Green Arrow that came out after Crisis on Infinite Earths, where Gerry Conway talked about how, comics shouldn't be aimed at older readers. Green Arrow, after this, should never be aimed at younger readers ever, because, as the introduction says, Mike Grell had given up on DC. He was doing creator-owned stuff, and Mike Gold, the editor, came to him and said, Green Arrow as an urban hunter. And that was all Mike Grell needed in order to jump on. He did a fantastic run on Green Arrow. Probably the only time I've ever loved Green Arrow, because it had him not just as an urban hunter, but he was a middle-aged guy who was dealing with the effects of his life lived up to that point. He and Black Canary were in a mature relationship. It wasn't a comic booky relationship where, they either love each other or they're breaking up. No, this was more like how adults are, where she's dealing with the mistakes he's made in his past. He's dealing with the fact that she has brought her past into the relationship. It was written for adults. Grell drew the 3-issue prestige format that was the Longbow Hunter. Then Ed Hannigan drew it, and when Ed Hannigan left, they had a few other artists, but the main artist who took over at that point was Minnesota's own Dan Jurgens. And in many ways, I still think this is Dan Jurgens' best artwork, because just Grell's scripts were very visual. The stories were complex. Shades of gray. It wasn't that everybody in it was a good guy or a bad guy. Yes, there were some horrible people, but a lot of it was where everybody's a little dirty. I would say I'm looking at it here, and it looks like Dick Giordano inked all but a few issues, the ones drawn by J.J. Birch and the ones drawn by Mike Grell. The rest were all inked by Dick Giordano, whether it was drawn by Dan Jurgens, Grant Mannheim, or Ed Hannigan. This is a fantastic, fantastic run. I can't praise it enough. I'm so excited that it's coming out in this format. One of my favorite DC books of the time, and it's one of those where I never wanted Mike Grell to leave. And to this day, I wish Mike Grell was doing a monthly comic or doing some special stuff. I miss his writing as well as his art. Believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books for over an hour and a half.
And if you were smart enough, you would have bought the Green Arrow Longbow Hunter when suggested it, because it's out of print and it ain't going cheap on the eBays.
Already. It just came out.
I know. So if you find one at your friendly Neighborhood comic store, pick it up.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
You want to go to the 45 Cents concert? It's 50 Cent featuring Nickelback.
We done, bitches!